Param Vishisht Seva Medal, Ati Vishisht Seva Medal, Sena Medal, Vishisht Seva Medal. Welcome you all to the Swarnim Vijay Varsh celebrations commemorating 50 years of India-Pakistan War. I welcome the guests on the dais, the chief guest, Professor Dr. Bimal N. Patel, member of National Security Advisory Board, Government of India, Vice Chancellor, Rashtriya Raksha University. Dr. Anand Tripathi, Pro Vice Chancellor, Rashtriya Raksha University. Shri Pavan Soni, Registrar, Rashtriya Raksha University. Dr. Akshat Mehta, University Dean, Rashtriya Raksha University. I also welcome the directors of all schools, the RRU staff, students, and the NCC cadets to the event. Before we begin the event, let's pay our I will please request all of you to take your seats. The India-Pakistan war commenced on 3rd of December when Pakistan launched preemptive airstrikes on a large number of Indian Air Force bases. A swift response to these unprovoked attacks was launched by the Indian Armed Forces on the Western and Eastern Front. Offensive action by the Indian Armed Forces led to the capture of Dhaka in East Pakistan, surrendering of over 92,000 Pakistani soldiers, and the emergence of Bangladesh as an independent nation. The defining characteristics of the 1971 war was the coordination and cooperation achieved among the three services of the Indian Armed Forces. This, more than anything else, along with the diplomatic and intelligence cooperation, made the Lightning Campaign leading to the liberation of Bangladesh look so effortless. India won a glorious victory, culminating in the surrender ceremony on 16th December 1971 at the Dhaka race course. Every Indian feels proud of this momentous victory. Now, let's have a glimpse of the victory.
कुछ ही घंटे पहले पाकिस्तानी हवाई जहाजों ने हमारे हवाई अड्डों पर बमबारी की। मुझे जरा भी संदेह नहीं है कि विजयी भारत की जनता की, भारत की बहादुर सेना की होगी।
हमारी वायुसेना ने दुश्मनों के हवाई अड्डों पर जवाबी हमला बोल दिया।
Destroy or capture the Pakistani army of occupation and liberate Bangladesh.
Liberate Bangladesh.
the Indian forces knock out over 52 Pakistani military aircraft and 90 tanks.
Dhaka is free. Bangladesh is free. The people of Bangladesh are free.
कुछ ही घंटे
May I now request General Mistry to kindly deliver his address on this occasion.
Thank you, Aparna, for that introduction and your gesture for remembering the authors of 1971 war, as well as those who we lost, unfortunately, the air crash on 8th of December. That gesture reminds us that nations have to continue to pay a cost for their freedom, a cost for their security, for their prosperity, for development. The cost will have to be in terms of investment, in terms of resources, in terms of cultivating social, cultural, and political harmony in your populace, as well as in terms of lives of young men and women who should be ready to lay their ultimate sacrifice. And to this little gesture, we are not only thanking them for their sacrifice, but we are also inspiring the future generations that should the time come, they will also live up to the expectations. Professor Dr. And welcome you all to this function to celebrate the Swarnim Vijay Varsh of our victory in 1971 war. As you are aware, the whole sequence of celebrations started on 16 December 2020 with the Prime Minister lighting the Swarnim Vijay Mashal at the National War Memorial in Delhi. And this Mashal being sent to all the four parts of India, four corners of India, and from there retracing its journey back to Delhi, where it would have converged today. So while the nation launched this Swarnim Vijay Mashal, the Rashtriya Raksha University also launched a Gyan Mashal or a Gyan Jyoti by starting a series of webinars to recollect various specific battles of 1971 war and listen to the veterans who themselves participated. So by this knowledge mashal, we are wanting to cultivate awareness of history and learn lessons from it. I must remind everyone that there is a very famous saying about history, that those who do not learn from their history are always condemned to repeat it. So if we do not learn from our own history, we will have to go through those lessons again and again. And in this context, I would also like to quote the example of Israel. The whole world is in awe of Israel, the way it has developed, the way it has grown. There is an old Hebrew saying which says a lot about Israel. It says, before you go anywhere, you should know where you come from. So therefore, you should know your history. And in this context, learning from the history of 1971 war is very, very important for all of us. And in this context, I would like to highlight some salient lessons at the macro level. My first deduction and lesson that I draw from the 71 war was that once for all, it totally debunked the two-nation theory, which was the basis of origin of Pakistan as a nation. While Pakistanis have been blaming us, India, for having engineered a division of their country, a dismemberment of their country. But if you dispassionately look at the whole situation, if ever there was most unnatural union, it was the union of East and West Pakistan. It was an epic of contradictions, and it was something that was bound to fail sometime or other. The kind of differences, disparities that existed between the eastern and the western wings of Pakistan just made it natural that that union had to end. And therefore, for Pakistan to continue to blame India till date and trying to seek a revenge for that is, I think, as wrong as it was for them to have handled the situation in East Bengal, East Pakistan at that time. By their own perfidies, by their own lack of judgment, I think they only hastened the process. So the earlier they learn this lesson and get away from an India-centric sense of revenge, the better it would be for them. What role did we play? Well, we assisted the Bangladeshis in hastening up the process. We assisted in making sure that the misery and the pain and the agony that the people of Bangladesh had to suffer was cut short. And to that extent, our sacrifices and our contribution cannot be undermined. But the basic lesson is that the concept of nationhood must be understood in its correct perspective. The second lesson I draw is this classic example of a whole of government approach to any kind of national venture. This was probably the first time since our independence where we used what is known as our comprehensive national power. All organs of the state, all institutes of the state, all instruments of our national power were used in absolute synergy and coherence. And when you have synergy, you produce what is known as the whole being larger than the sum of parts. And it is that synergy which paid us dividends beyond the effort that was actually being invested, quite out of proportion. The third lesson is there is just no substitute to preparations and training. If you want to win any venture, if you want to succeed in any venture, whether it be war or any other event it may be, there is just no substitute to having adequate preparations and training your people. Shaping the international opinion, shaping the battlefield, ensuring adequate logistic build-up and the logistic stamina to sustain a war were all part of the preparations that took place over nearly 1 year period prior to the actual hostilities in December 71. You needed to train your troops. The orientation of the armed forces had to change, which were largely oriented to fight against the West Pakistan, because that is where the main force of Pakistan was concentrated. From there to shift that orientation and mindset to the riverine terrain of then East Pakistan required certain amount of adjustment, recalibration and reorientation. So all that time had to be generated. So there is no substitute to preparations and training. There are no shortcuts. This war also taught us some very important lessons for a two-front challenge. Now, while in recent past there is a lot of mention of two-front war or a two-front threat or a challenge that India faces, sometimes it's also referred to as two and a half front. there are enough examples in the history, particularly the European history, through the 17th, 18th, 19th, and 20th century, where various empires or big states have faced different threats and conducted different wars. So there are some important lessons to handle. First and foremost is that you must be very clear what is your primary front. You must determine what is your primary front, concentrate major part of your resources there, and keep the other front as a secondary front and try and do only a holding action. That is precisely what we did in Bangladesh, and that's why we had a phenomenal success. As against that, the Pakistani strategy believed that the defense of Bangladesh actually lay in West Pakistan. And therefore, they kept their resources largely concentrated in West Pakistan. But they just could not reorient themselves to see the shift in the center of gravity from the west to the east. Only about 4 divisions, less than 25% of the strength of the Pakistan army that time was deployed in Bangladesh. So therefore, determining your primary front and focusing your resources there, I think, is always important. Again, in all ventures of life. The next important lesson is that we as a country must cultivate a strategic culture. Unless you look beyond, unless we are able to visualize various options, possibilities, contingencies, we will not be able to draw full benefit of the resources that you have invested and the results that you have achieved. Today, it is a moot point whether at the end of 71, if we have had a better end state than the line of control and the Shimla Agreement. There are points in favor and against from both sides. One side feels that you could not have stretched your victory beyond what you did, else there would have been hell to pay internationally. The other view is that had you thought through properly, and maybe we would have drawn our advantage further and have had a more permanent outcome as far as the West Pakistan and Kashmir is concerned. But today it is a moot point. The lesson is, did we really think through these possibilities? I don't think so. Today, very conveniently, some of the people say that no, but the war aims were limited. It was only to liberate Bangladesh. Well, that may have been the immediate aim. As a nation with a strategic thought process and strategic culture, you should have seen what is in your best interest. And well, if your resources did not permit to go beyond that, it could have been a conscious decision. In my view, I think this issue was not adequately examined. So we need to develop that kind of culture. You start doing that kind of analysis. And that is where educational institutes, research institutes like ours come into play, where you generate options and possibilities. Leadership. I think there is just no substitute to having clear, decisive, visionary leadership. And leadership at all levels, at the political level, at the head of the government, within the government, and within the military forces. I think we had the finest combination of leadership at that time, both at the political level and at the military level. I would dare say even at the opposition, that they too played their part in the larger national goals. And that is a major lesson for us. The last but not the least, my mind is that ultimately it is the man behind the machine that matters. Pakistanis had the best of equipment. They were given the top of the line products by the Western countries, particularly the US, through the 60s. They had the battle tanks, they had the saber jets, they were top of the line equipment at that time. The Mukti Bahini was very, very poorly equipped. The Indian Army was reasonably equipped, but not as high profile, as latest, as kind of equipment that the Pakistan Army had. But despite that, is the resourcefulness, the creativity, and the innovativeness, as well as the commitment of these troops that turned the tables completely on Pakistan. So ultimately, it is the man behind the machine that matters. And lastly, I must thank my team of DSS, both the current version as well as the version that we started with sometime a year back in December 2020, then under the leadership of General Saha, and later on under the leadership of Colonel Joshi, which ensured that this Gyan Jyot or knowledge mashal that was lit on 16 December 2020 continued its journey right through those 12 months, which culminated into the final webinar that took place on 7th of December, and compilation of those interactions has resulted into this book on the 1971 war. So thank you once again, and I hand you over back to Aparna for further proceedings.
Thank you, sir. Since 16 December 2020, CEST has conducted a series of 12 monthly webinar series on 1971 war. Every month, we have brought out new aspects of the 1971 war, including the key battles. These webinars have been possible due to the guidance and foresight of our founding director, Lieutenant General Dr. Subrata Saha. These webinars would not have been possible without the people who worked tirelessly to ensure the success of the webinars. Colonel Deepak Joshi, Mr. Nirmal Mathew, Ms. Kanchana Ramanujam, Saurav Rajpurohit, Ms. Kritika Patil, Mr. Abhinav Sarkar, Mr. Ishan Tong, Ms. Sumana Singha, and Ms. Divya Malhotra. Based on the success of the webinars, which has received a whopping around 2,000 views on the RRU's YouTube channel and other social media handles, to preserve the lessons learned from the webinars and to record the narrations of the brave soldiers and their families of the martyrs and historians, we decided to come out with a book titled 50 Years of the 1971 War, Accounts from Veterans. So we now move on to the much-awaited book launch ceremony. May I please request our Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. Bimal L. Patel, and dignitaries on stage to please do the honors of releasing the book. A huge round of applause for this momentous occasion, everyone. May I also request the editors of the book, Ms. Kritika Patil, Mr. Aditya Singh, and Mr. Rahul Rawat, and other dignitaries on the dais for a group photograph. A huge round of applause. Thank you, sir. The first webinar was held on 16th December 2020, titled as Vijay Divas 2020, Dawn of the Golden Jubilee Year. Following that, webinars were held discussing the Battle of Hilli in January, Battle of Naya Chor in February, a detailed discussion on the Bangladesh genocide in March, Battle of Basantar in the month of April, naval operations in May, Battle of Longewala in June, followed by Air Force operations in the month of July, Battle of Champ in August, Battle of Fazilka in September, Fall of Dhaka in the month of October, and the last on the diplomatic actions before, during, and after the 1971 war in December. May I please request our Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. Bimal N. Patel, to kindly deliver his remarks.
A very good morning. Lieutenant General Asif Mistry, Director of School of Internal Security, Defense and Strategic Studies, Dr. Anand Kumar Tripathi, Vice Chancellor, Dr. Akshat Mehta, the Dean of Academics, Mr. Paul Soni, Registrar, the team of School of Internal Security, Defense and Strategic Studies, directors, RI faculty, staff, and students. We have come together for the Swarnim Vijay Varsh celebration. Why was the 1971 war important? What must be learned from this war? Today, we commemorate 50 years of India's victory over Pakistan. We celebrate our friendship with Bangladesh and we pay our deepest tribute to our fallen soldiers from the 1971 war. On behalf of the Rashtriya Aksa University, I would also like to express my sincere condolences to the Indian Armed Forces and families of the Chief of Defence Staff, General Bipin Rawat, his wife, Menem Rawat, and 11 other military personnel who lost their lives in the IAF chopper crash. This tragic accident is a huge loss to our country. Therefore, to honor his memory, I would like to start this address by talking about General Bipin Rawat's assessment about joint place in the 1971 war and its implications. At an event in the India International Center on 15 December, a very significant observation was made. In 1971, even though Field Marshal then General Manekshaw was not the CDS, he became the principal advisor to the Indian government with the support of Admiral S. Nanda and Air Chief Marshal P.C. Lal. They were all working together in an integrated and joint manner. In the Eastern Front, an Eastern Theatre was created, headed by Lieutenant General Jagdish Singh Arora, Air Marshal H.C. Diwan, and Vice Admiral C. Krishnan. They had a joint team where they strategized the war together and hence achieved incredible success. This jointness was achieved because significant time was given to prepare for the war, where they would work out the plans together and use all the resources efficiently. Therefore, the battle was truly integrated. By 8 December, the Indian force had completed control over the East Pakistani airspace. Since the Pakistani Air Force was completely annihilated and there was no air presence, the tangled drop by our paratroopers was possible. This led to the fall of Dhaka, capturing of 90,000 prisoners, and the liberation of Bangladesh. The Indian Navy too made sure that the enemy did not escape from East Pakistan when the troops were circling Dhaka. This was only possible because of joint base in the Eastern Theatre. What was the situation in the Western Front? There are two army commands, the Western and the Southern Command, under Lieutenant General K.P. Kandit, operating from Simla, and Lieutenant General C. Bawood, operating from Pune respectively. Along with them, we had Admiral C. Kohli, heading the Western Naval Command, and Air Marshal Engineer as Air Force counterpart. As observed by General Bipin Rawat quite aptly, the military commands in the Western Front were not as integrated as in the Eastern Front. Here we had two army commanders and their Navy and Air Force counterparts. We had both the Western and Southern Army commanders who thought that they could get a determined victory individually. Therefore, the air resources too were getting split between these two commands instead of appropriate and effective allocation for collective war efforts. The Navy too had plans for its own. They used patrol boats, which Mughal got from USSR, to bomb the Karachi harbor. Although the war was won on the Western Front too, the battle was not fought in an integrated manner. On the Western Front, the loss of our land and casualty was more than the Eastern Front. This erudite assessment by General Bipin Rawat on the 1971 war demonstrates his commitment for jointness and cooperation between the services. Therefore, losing him is a huge setback for our 22 target of having joint theatre commands. Now talking about jointness, we just launched the book titled 50 Years of 1971 War Accounts from Veterans. Under the guidance and vision of Lieutenant General Subedar Saha, the former director of the school, we have been organizing a series of monthly webinars since December last year on select important battles of the 1971 war so that the country gets a veteran's perspective of these battles. This remarkable book is a compilation of the 12 webinars conducted by the team, including the operational and personal accounts of 51 veterans and participants. The book, edited by General Mistry, Pritika Patil, Rahul Rawat, and Aditya Kumar Singh, is unique due to the personal recountal of battles from Indian and Bangladeshi veterans encompassing all three levels: strategic, operational, and tactical. The chronological order gives out a more vital message of the battlefield, leadership, and initiatives of the individual speakers. Ultimately, the book provides multiple viewpoints to the readers and helps them understand India's grand strategy during the 1971 war. The publication of this book has been made possible with the enormous efforts of the people who work extensively on the monthly webinars. Colonel Deepak Joshi, the former director in charge, along with the team, has made sure that all the webinars were conducted smoothly and discussions remained consistent with the larger objectives of this initiative. Nirmal Matthew, Kanchana Ramanujan, so Raj Purohit, all have played a vital role in shaping the webinar series. Besides them, Ishan Pong, Pritika Patil, too, have worked tirelessly to keep the vision of General Saha alive. Finally, General Asit Mistry and the team made sure that the finale of the webinar series was a grand success. I take this opportunity to congratulate my team on behalf of the Rashtriya Aksa University and for both the nations for successfully complementing this exercise and making university immensely proud. This book is a small but very important contribution from the Rashtriya Aksa University to cherish the Bangladeshi-India friendship and to pay homage to the fallen for whom we must remember the war forever. Jai Hind. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We now move on to the prize distribution ceremony. A quiz titled 1971 War, India's Victory over Pakistan was conducted on 14th December 2021. I now request Registrar Sir to kindly award the certificate and cash prize of Rs 1500 to the team securing third position. The winners are Sagar Moli, Kinle Wangchuk, a huge round of applause for all the winners. Thank you, sir. I now request Dr. Tripathi to kindly award the certificate and cash prize of rupees 3,000 to the team securing second position. The winners are Hardev Singh, Kunal, and Dev Bhatia. A huge round of applause, everyone. Thank you, sir. May I now request our Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. Bimal N. Patel, to kindly award the certificate and cash prize of rupees 5,000 to the team securing the first position. The winners are Aman Sharma, Harshendu, and Kartikeya. A huge round of applause for the winners. Thank you, sir. I request Dean Academic to give out the participation certificates. Isha Sharma, Nishaba, Rohit Pillai, Yatharth, Pavan, Vivek. We request you to please come on stage. A huge round of applause for all the participants. Thank you, sir. As a token of acknowledgement and also as part of Going Green, we would like to present plants as souvenirs to the dignitaries on the dais. May I please request our Director, General Mystery, to hand over the souvenir to our Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. Bimal N. Patel. A huge round of applause, everyone.
Continue to inspire. It will not go away.
Yes.
It's like knowledge. It should continue to grow.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Recycling, environmental friendly.
May I please request Ms. Ulupi Bora, Assistant Professor, SISTIS, to hand over the souvenir to Mr. Pavan Soni. A huge round of applause. May May I also request Ms. Bora to hand over the souvenir to Dr. Anand Tripathi. A huge round of applause, everyone. Thank you, sir. May I request Dr. Sitlu to kindly hand over the souvenir to Academic Dean, Dr. Akshat Mehta. A huge round of applause, everyone. Thank you, sir. May I request Dr. Junjun to kindly come up on stage and present the souvenir to our Director General, Asit Mistry. A huge round of applause, everyone. Thank you, sir. I now request our Assistant Director, Mr. Mohit Charan, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Thank you. Professor Dr. Bimal Patel, Vice Chancellor, Rashtriya Raksha University and Member Designate, United Nations International Law Commission. Dr. Anand Kumar Tripathi, Pro Vice Chancellor. Dr. Akshat Mehta, University Dean. Shri Pavan Kumar Soni, Registrar. Distinguished guests, faculty members, staff, NCC cadets, and students. A very good afternoon to you all. It is my honor and privilege to extend the vote of thanks on this occasion. On behalf of Lieutenant General Asit Mistry, Director, School of Internal Security, Defense and Strategic Studies, I thank our Chief Guest, Dr. Bimal Patel, Professor Dr. Bimal Patel, for his august presence and his enlightening and insightful speech. It is said that if you wish for peace, you must understand war. In order to commemorate the glorious chapter in India's military history, that is the India-Pakistan War of 1971 or the Bangladesh Liberation War, and as per the vision and guidance of Vice Chancellor Sir and Lieutenant General Subrata Saha, our founding director, we embarked upon this year-long journey comprising a series of webinars covering the various facets of this war. I take this opportunity to thank all the panelists who participated in these webinars, which included veteran armed forces officers and many diplomats, academicians from both India and Bangladesh. I extend my sincere thanks to our former directors, Lieutenant General Subrata Saha and Colonel Deepak Joshi, and my colleagues, Mr. Nirmal Matthews, Mr. Saurabh Rajpurohit, Mr. Ishant Singh Tonk, Ms. Kritika Patil, Ms. Divya Malhotra, and Ms. Sumana Singha for their detailed planning and execution for these webinars. I would also like to thank the editorial team and hope that this book will contribute towards enhancing the national security awareness amongst the masses. I express my sincere thanks to Pro Vice Chancellor Sir, Dean Sir, Registrar Sir, and all directors for their guidance. A big thanks to RRU's NCC team, led by Dr. Gaurav Kushwaha and Lieutenant Radhika Kerai. The IT team, led by Keyur Bhai, support team led by Dilip Bhai, and the university staff for their cooperation and support. Very many thanks to the organizing committee, led by General Mistry Sir and comprising Ms. Aparna Verma, Dr. Junjun Sharma Pathak, Dr. Sidlo, Ms. Ulupi Bora, Ms. Kritika Patil, Mr. Rahul Rawat, Mr. Aditya Kumar Singh, Mr. Ankit Kumar, Mr. Abhinava Sarkar, the NCC cadets, and our students. I'd like to thank all members of the RRU family present here for joining us in this celebration. Lastly, I want to thank my colleague Ms. Aparna Verma for anchoring this event. Thank you very much.
May I please request everyone to please rise up for the national anthem. I request everyone to join us for high tea. Thank you, everyone.